And welcome back to another episode of the On the Sideline podcast with Jackson and Kyle. I am Jackson, and I'm joined here, as always, by the man who gets an A+ in all of our hearts, Kyle. Kyle, how are you doing?
I'm doing very good. I appreciate the A+ grade. I'm going to give you an A+ as well. How you been, man? It's been a couple weeks.
Yeah, it's been a while. I was at Yellowstone last week, so in classic On the Sideline podcast fashion, forgot to mention it and realized right after the show that I had not mentioned it at all.
That's exactly how we like to do things around here. Wait till the last second. Did you meet Kevin Costner?
Yeah, he was. Yeah, he was actually at the gate greeting everyone.
Yeah, that's a bad joke. Bad joke.
But sometimes you got to go with it. We're rusty. We're coming back a week off. It's going to take us some time to get back into the thick of things.
Yeah, exactly. So it's the off season for everybody. We're still working out the kinks here.
Yeah, exactly. Kyle, we have, I think, what should be an interesting show, and we're only doing half the league. Usually we try to get the whole league into one show, but I think splitting it up could be more fun. We're doing the AFC offseason grades. The offseason's still technically going. There still are some free agents here and there, but I think this could be an interesting way to kind of put a pin on the bulk of the offseason before we get into our season previews and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, I would say 95% of the major moves have probably happened by now. There's probably, obviously DeAndre Hopkins is still kind of, something that's still in the balance, which could change. Probably, it could change a grade of one of the AFC teams, I think, definitely for sure, if one of them were to get him, or even the NFC teams that we're going to do next week. Or, you could, there's probably going to be a few other trades during the offseason, a few other cuts that are going to seem bizarre at the time. But for the most part, I think just about everything's wrapped up and we could talk about it.
Yeah, it should be interesting. You want to just get into it?
Yeah, let's dive right in. I guess, how do you want to do it?
Yeah, so the way I have it set up in my notes is going from the AFC East and then going to North, South, and then West. Does that work for you?
Yeah, that's fine with me.
Okay. Yeah. So let's start off with the Buffalo Bills, the team that looking to get over the hump, didn't have a ton that they could do. And that's kind of how I evaluate this stuff. Isn't necessarily just how much better did you get, but what did you do with the resources you had available, the cap space you had, with the money you had, and with the draft capital they had. Did some solid things. They kept Jordan Poyer. They added Damian Harris. And really what they did was, I thought they had a good draft, getting Dalton Kincaid and O'Cyrus Torrence. Not one that'll wow you necessarily, but I'm going to give this a C+. I think it's above average, but not massively above average.
Yeah, I thought this was good. I did B. I'm pretty nice with these grades, I will say.
Okay.
I'm going to be probably favorable to some teams compared to you. And I just think that's kind of how I did it. Because, I mean, we don't really know how it's going to look at the end of the day. So that's kind of how I went for it. I understand why they didn't bring back Terrell Edmonds. That is a huge price tag. And when you looked at this Bills offseason, you figured with Poyer on the block on free agency, with Edmonds on free agency, that they're probably going to lose one of those guys based on the price tags that were floating around. And I think they made the right move, because paying Edmonds that kind of price tag doesn't feel like the right solution, paying off-ball linebacker that kind of money. That being said, it's still not a perfect solution what they have at linebacker going into next season, but I think the rest of the defense should be pretty good. Bringing Poyer back is good. Like you said, I had 2 first-round grades on their first 2 picks with Dalton Kincaid and O'Cyrus Torrence. Thank you. I think that's a really good play overall, and I give it a B overall.
Yeah, not a ton to talk about with the Bills. Want to move on to the next one?
Yeah, let's keep it rolling.
Let's go to the Dolphins, a team that had very little draft capital, but still I thought got a good corner in their draft. And the other thing they did was added Vic Fangio, which I am counting, and they added Jalen Ramsey, who all that combined, I feel like what I didn't have hardly any massive things to work with. They were still able to significantly get better. I don't know how much I love the Mike White backup situation. I maybe would have liked to go with a better, more trustworthy backup. But other than that, I was really a big fan of the Dolphins offseason doing what they had. I'm giving this an A, not an A plus, but an A.
I have an A on this one as well. I thought it was a
Mhm.
good offseason. Vic Fangio, I think, is the biggest move of the offseason, and it's probably the best move of the offseason. When you couple in Jalen Ramsey with that, that only solidifies this group, which, you know, I know they've dealt with some injuries, but it was bizarrely weak last year, right? It was a bad situation. They needed to fix some things. They address it basically immediately in the offseason. That's two of their first moves, and I thought they're both really good. I'm with you. I like Cam Smith too. I think that's a good value pick. And one other guy too I thought could be interesting is Devin Achane, because this running game wasn't very strong for Miami last year too. And that's another thing that it basically they went down their list and said, these are what we were bad at last year. This is what we're going to fix. They fixed that secondary, which had some holes. They fixed the defensive play calling with a new defensive coordinator who's one of the best in the game. And then they fixed their running game with a running back in the draft that people, some people had him in the same tier as like a Jahmyr Gibbs. Some people really valued him that highly. So A-Chain, I think, is going to be a good player for them as well.
Yeah, I think one of those people might have been me. I was a big fan of A-Chain. I liked him a lot. And the speed really works with that kind of system. I brought up the one nitpick, so I guess let's talk about that as well. Could they have gone after a more trustworthy backup? Could this have been like a good, Jacoby Brissett team potentially, instead of going with Mike White, who has had a couple good games, but also a lot of disastrous games, and really is I would say a pretty big unknown who has shown flashes in a similar system. I get why they did it, but I think I would have liked to have more of a trustworthy backup given to his injury history.
Potentially, but at the same time, they were also dealing with a difficult situation of trying to find that backup that would be willing to come into that situation. Like, I guess if you look at it, like Baker Mayfield went to Tampa because there's a chance of getting the starting job. You
Hmm.
know, Jacoby Brissett, I know they like Sam Howell, but I'm going to stand on this hill and say I still think Jacoby Brissett is going to start for Washington week 1. And he
Hmm.
probably is going into that situation thinking he has a good chance to start. Anybody who was going to become a potential backup quarterback for Miami knew that they were going to be the secondary option right away. So it's hard to recruit a quarterback of Brissett's caliber at that point because Brissett had a good year last year. Brissett was
Hmm.
good and he earned that. He's going to earn that chance to win the job at Washington. So is it Mike White, Taylor Heineke, that level player? I thought they did pretty good with that.
Yeah, I guess that's probably fair. Let's move on. Let's go to your team, Kyle. Let me guess, A plus plus, right?
A plus plus.
Hmm.
I thought it was good. I actually said, what did I say here? I said B for this one as well. I have a lot of Bs. Anyway,
Okay. Hmm.
I thought it was a very, very good offseason. I think people are too reactionary with some of the stuff when it comes to like, oh well, they didn't draft a receiver high enough. Sometimes the board just doesn't break your way. And you know what? When it comes to the draft, I'd rather just have a guy that you feel more confident is going to be a good player in 5 years compared to drafting for a need sometimes. There are
Hmm.
probably a couple receivers they could have reached for, but they got guys who I thought were good value picks as well. Christian Gonzalez is the kind of player who feels like he could step in and play for this team right away. He's that level of an athlete. He's going into what I think is the perfect situation for him because I think he needed some coaching. Not a lot of teams have done better coaching up cornerbacks than the New England Patriots. So I think that's an awesome situation for him. Keon White's another guy who's just a physically impressive human being who's going to go to this situation and is another pass rusher that adds to that repertoire. You could argue straight up Jacoby Myers is a better player than Juju Smith-Schuster. I wouldn't really argue it too much. The only thing is, and I've said it a few times on here, I think Juju Smith-Schuster is better after the catch, and I think that's something Patriots desperately needed in their receiver department. So I understand the reasoning for letting Myers go to bring in Smith-Schuster because he provides a different skill set that I think this offense really needed as far as yards of the catch. And then as far as, the fringe stuff too, they brought in some really nice offensive line depth, which I think will really help. Offensive coordinator was a huge thing to address this offseason. And I think Bill O'Brien's going to be pretty good in that role. I don't think he's like one of the 5 best offensive play callers in the league or anything, but it's going to be better just because he knows what he's doing over there compared to Matt Patricia. And you go from I like James Robinson as another back helping out in this group. I think Mike Gesicki's an upgrade over Jonnu Smith. So overall, I give it a B because that's all really good stuff for me.
Yeah, I have it as a B as well. I love the Christian Gonzalez selection. I think that's a perfect one. I'm totally with you. It's like you can't just draft for need. I think we've talked about this where it's like drafting for need. It kind of, if you're between 2 players and you need one position a little bit more, okay, fine, do it that way. But you tend to, when you draft for need, get a worse player. Don't get a worse player. Get the best player available, and then figure it out in free agency and stuff like that. I'm not going to agree with you on I think we're just going to have to agree to disagree. I think Jacoby Myers is a better player than Juju Smith-Schuster. I think that I would rather have him than Smith-Schuster, but I do get your argument about the fit and things like that. As a whole, again, there's things they did well, but I don't know if they could. It's kind of one of those classic Patriots seasons of they did a lot of little moves well. I think we're all still hoping for that one big move that maybe could still come with Hopkins, but as of right now has not happened.
Yeah. I mean, if they add Hopkins, this is an A+, right? Because this team has always felt like a team that is a team that is desperate for a number 1 option. I think they got a bunch of nice, really number 2 and 3 options, but that number 1 option is severely lacking. And, even if you think Myers is better than Smith-Schuster, which, like I said, I'm not going to argue all that much, neither one of those guys is moving the needle that much. At the end of the day, you still need a number 1 over both of them, and they don't have that option, which is the biggest problem. But this is a team that was the number 1 DVOA defense in the second half of the season last year. They add even more to stockpile that defense. Kyle Duggar, I think the one question you still have is deep safety with this team. How's that going to look without Devin McCourty for the first time in over a decade? So how's that position going to look? But they have so many safeties with Kyle Duggar, Adrian Phillips. Jalen Mills can even step back there and play safety. He's probably a better safety than a corner because he's a bad corner. And then they also got Peppers. So, they got all these guys back there. I think they figured that part out. I think this defense is going to be nasty. And if they can add one more receiver to end this offseason, it's an A, but it's a B because of that.
Yeah, I think I agree. Are excuses are out for Mac Jones? No more excuses?
Hey, he was 11-11 today in media open OTAs. So
good.
Mac Jones is coming for the crown. Comeback season.
Okay, yeah. I think that video you sent me on Twitter of the Buccaneers quarterbacks, I think they might have been 0 for 11 in that.
Yeah. Can you win can you win comeback player of the year for just, Matt Patricia-itis? Is that a thing?
You should be. I always felt like comeback player of the year shouldn't just come to the best player coming off of an injury. I feel like that's not the point of the award.
I mean, I would argue playing for Matt Patricia is worse than an injury.
Potentially, yeah.
That's more damaging to a career than a torn ACL at this point. We have guys coming back from a torn ACL in 6 months.
Right.
You may never recover from playing with Matt Patricia.
That's very true. Very. Look at Jeff Okudah. Happened to a lot of guys. Let's go to the Jets. The Jets. Listen, there's some issues with what the Jets did. It feels like they made some moves to help make Aaron Rodgers happy, which sometimes you got to do. I thought that their draft was at times just a bit of a mess with some of the moves they made, specifically that first round selection. They added debatably the best quarterback in football right now. This is an A+.
Yeah. I keep struggling with this because, I really didn't like anything else they did.
Right.
I just didn't. But you add Aaron Rodgers, so I can't really complain about your offseason that much. So, yeah, I have an A for this. I can't complain about it. But I do want to highlight that this team needed a tackle desperately, added no tackle. Because the guy they apparently wanted in the first round was taken right before them. Shout out to the Patriots for the trade back. Thank you.
Great move by them. Great done. Well done.
Alan Lazard's nice. I like Alan Lazard, I think, more than the consensus. I think he's a solid player. But it's just okay, I don't think McCole Hardman's going to move the needle that much, and I don't think Randall Cobb's going to move the needle that much. So you basically just came in and added kind of fringe replacement level players. And I don't know. Like, I just didn't feel like anything really moved the needle for me outside of getting Aaron Rodgers. Now, you got Aaron Rodgers, so that's a big thing. But for a team that is trying to now win a Super Bowl because you have Aaron Rodgers, and you basically knew all offseason Aaron Rodgers wanted to come to your team and nobody else, it felt like they could have done a little bit more to go all in.
I don't disagree. Yeah, again, the comparison that I feel like what everyone's trying to do now is that Tampa Bay Buccaneers model, which you shouldn't do. You play the cards that you're dealt. Don't try to recapture something that happened. But in Tampa Bay, they added Tristan Wirfs and Antoine Winfield in that same draft. But you look at that compared to this, it's like there's still already issues that they didn't. I don't know if they fully captured. You're right. They haven't gotten to tackle. Maybe they're just expecting Dwayne Brown to kind of return to form. And be, what we've seen him be in the past, but I don't know if I'm expecting what I hope is, hey, maybe your 37-year-old tackle who wasn't good at all last year will all of a sudden look back like he's great again. That's the concern. That's not something I'm expecting to have happen. And I do think with the offense, it feels like they're expecting Garrett Wilson to be a true number one, which I could see. That seems possible. But then Corey Davis, I think that I'm shocked they haven't gotten rid of him and signed someone else. Like, wouldn't that have made total sense? Trade Corey Davis or even just cut him and then use that money to get Jacoby Myers. Like, wouldn't that have been like a perfect, and again, who knows if he would have gone there or whatever, but like, wouldn't that have been on paper a perfect situation?
It would have been. It would have been ideal, definitely, because I definitely think this team is lacking a number two. I guess I haven't really looked at the Davis numbers. Is he one of those guys that might be you save more money as the post-June 1st cut? I haven't quite looked at that. But
I don't believe so. I could double check, but from my understanding, I believe they could have cut him now for no dead cap.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe they just didn't get a vibe that Myers wanted to go there. I mean, this is another team where it feels like a DeAndre Hopkins level player could change everything. But I still feel like there's still a bunch of questions around this roster where, I think this is going to be a better Jets team because you have better quarterback play, without a doubt. But now this Jets team made the move to compete for Super Bowls. And as far as Super Bowl winning rosters, I don't have this as one of my top five Super Bowl teams right now. And that's just kind of, if that's the expectations you want to play at, that's kind of where I have them held.
Yeah, you have someone in the chat saying Lazard is a 2 for sure. I wouldn't say for sure. He's shown flashes of it. He's certainly shown flashes of it, but I don't think we've seen the consistency out of any of these players. But again, I don't know. Maybe you'll figure it out. Maybe Corey Davis with Aaron Rodgers will kind of, look like that number 2 that we saw him be in Tennessee, where he had an 1,000-yard season. Like, there are issues on this roster, but the reality is we're talking about a team that missed the playoffs as a potential championship contender. And maybe if we don't love them as a championship contender, that's still very big. I said A+. Did you give your grade?
Yeah, I just said A. I mean, they got Aaron Rodgers, so they could have the MVP of the league next year.
Yeah. Do the Jets win the division? Well, you have to stay tuned to our division previews coming up before too long.
Yeah, those will be probably July, August. So
yeah, and also no. But okay, moving on. Cincinnati Bengals are next up on this list. The Bengals had hey, they got you got a very good player from your biggest competition with Orlando Brown Jr. going to you for a very shockingly low amount of money. I think we were thinking it would be $23 million a year, only $16 million a year, which was very surprising. That's a good move. Again, I think I'm going to give the Bengals. I'll go B here.
I went B too. I thought that was a really good move with Orlando Brown. I mean, the Chiefs fans are talking like Orlando Brown's the worst left tackle to ever play the game.
Right.
Like, honestly, I do think I don't think he's a perfect left tackle, but I think he's a very, very good left tackle. And obviously, I think, part of the problem why he struggled is because he struggled against the Bengals. Now he's on the Bengals, so he doesn't have to deal with the defensive line anymore, except for in practice. He's not going to see a lot of teams with that kind of speed on the edge. So yeah, I mean, the big thing with the Bengals is their safeties got gutted, and we knew that was probably going to happen anyways. So I went with a B just because there is some questions still there with their secondary, and I thought those safeties, especially with just the way they play defense, I thought those two safeties were pretty important to them, and they've prepared for this in a way because they've drafted so many secondary players over the last few years. It's just the expectations are now on those guys to really perform. And we haven't seen them perform at that level, so that's going to be the biggest question heading into the season. But overall, I thought everything else was pretty fine. I liked Hurst for them last year, and they don't have him at tight end anymore. I think that affects them a little bit, but this is still a potent group from top to bottom on offense, and the defense is the biggest question with that secondary.
Yeah. Is there a bit of a concern of Orlando Brown Jr.? Like, at what point do teams just say, you know what, let's just put our fastest edge rusher on you?
Yeah, obviously it's going to become a bit of a concern if teams start to take advantage of it even more and more. But, I still think if you go consistency basis, Orlando Brown consistently has been a good pass blocker. I don't think it's going to be a catch-all that every team now with the fast edge rusher is going to beat him. I don't think that's just going to happen every time from now on.
Maybe do you go faster? Do you put like a wide receiver on Orlando Brown? Maybe like if you're the Ravens, put Lamar Jackson out there.
Just put a safety on him at all times.
Yeah. So, why not?
Yeah. I guess it's a strategy.
Okay, well, we'll see if any team implements that. Let's talk about the Ravens. Why don't we? The Ravens kept Lamar Jackson. Didn't look like they were going to at a certain point. That is obviously a huge part. They also added Odell Beckham Jr. and Zay Flowers. You know what? I'm a big fan of what they did. I think they had to, had to keep Lamar, and they had to address the receiving core. We've been pounding the table, address the receiving core, pay Lamar. They finally did it. To me, this is going to be an A minus. I like getting Rocky Sin, but I think that could have maybe still helped out that secondary a little bit. But as a whole, again, very big fan of this one.
Yeah, I had an A for this one. I liked what they did. Like you said, they not only did they need to bring back Lamar Jackson, which I don't know how much credit you get for like just being like, okay, we'll wait to see if somebody else signed and then pay him for basically the same amount of money to keep your quarterback. But at the same time, they didn't overcomplicate things. They brought their guy back and they added talent around him. So, there's no excuse for this offense not to be awesome because you got Zay Flowers, you got Rashad Bateman, you got Odell Beckham Jr., you got all of this talent. I'm with you. They could have added another corner, but I don't know. Like, do you really doubt Baltimore not to figure it out defensively next season?
Sure.
Especially in the secondary. Like, I think they're just going to be pretty good there always. So I think this is an A. I think they're going to be good next year. They're dangerous.
Yeah, they could win a Super Bowl. I think they're a Super Bowl contender.
They need their guys to stay healthy, but when they're healthy, they're dangerous.
Their ceiling is winning the Super Bowl.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's move on then. Why don't we? That is the Baltimore Ravens. Let's go to their bitter rival, the Pittsburgh Steelers, who, it's an interesting selection. They added, or interesting situation. They got Isaac Seumalo, who I think is, a very good player. They added Patrick Peterson, who I think could definitely help them out a lot. Allen Robinson, a very fascinating move. I think I'm not quite as high on their draft as some other people were. I was not a huge fan of Broderick Jones, the guy that the Jets wanted to draft to tackle in the first round. And I also wasn't as high on Joey Porter Jr. They got him in the second round, where a lot of people thought he could have gone mid-first round. I had a second round grade on him. And then Darnell Washington, I actually like a lot as a tight end. But I still like their draft. I still think it was a good draft. I still think they had a good offseason where they added some talent. I'm just going to go, I think I'm going to go B- here, though.
B-. Okay, this is one of my favorite off seasons. I had this as an A+. I thought, I think Seumalo's a huge add for this group. I think he's a monster at guard. I think he's really going to help this group. And I like Jones too. I think the combination of Seumalo's just monstrous size and Jones's athleticism, I think is a really nice duo for this left side of the offensive line. I think that's going to help. I think Peterson's a nice candidate to kind of work out here. 2 new corners to their defense. I'm a little skeptical, but I do think that they can be pretty good here with him and Joey Porter Jr. I like Joey Porter Jr. I do think he's going to have a bit of a learning curve. To me, this entire season comes down to one of these receivers taking a leap, whether it's Deontay Johnson finally becoming that true number one option or George Pickens becoming a number one option. I think Pickens has the just pure athletic talent to do it, and he's shown real flashes of being that number one guy. But they really need that number one receiver, and I think he can be that. But I thought overall it was really good, and I think this could be a really dangerous team next year. I think they're a
Don't,
sleeper.
don't let Steelers fans hear you not calling Deontay Johnson a number one.
I've been as pro Deontay Johnson as just about anybody over the
That's
last
not
couple
true.
of
Not,
years.
not as high as Steelers fans have been on him.
I really like him, but I just don't think
Mm-hmm.
he's a number one. I think he's a two. He's a bona fide two. But I mean, he's what PFF's 45th graded wide receiver last year. I mean, and before that he was 39th. That's kind of that's a number two, literally.
Mm-hmm. Is that part of the weird thing? The Steelers' strategy has always been draft guys in rounds 2 and 3 at the wide receiver position, and they get consistent good wide receivers that way. It's part of the issue though. Like they haven't really had that like dominant receiver since Antonio Brown has left.
Well, yeah, I mean the strategy works excellently when you get Antonio Brown and when you get
Right.
guys like Mike Wallace, Hines Ward, that kind of thing. When you get
Mm-hmm.
guys like that, obviously it works brilliantly. But right now they have a bunch of good, not great guys. But I mean, there is a chance that either next year or the year after, Pickens is in the same category, and then all of a sudden it's like, okay, well the Steelers are the Steelers again. They always do this, and it's always worked out well for them. So yeah, I mean, it could be just one of those between years, but if Pickens lives up to the potential, then yeah, I mean they've done it again, so I'm not worried.
Yeah. Think I agree. Let's move on. Cleveland Browns. Cleveland Browns are here. This to me is I'm just gonna give it a C. And again, a C isn't bad. We're definitely leaning positive on this thing, but I don't know. They added talent, which you're supposed to do in the offseason, right? I did like the extending Ethan Pocket, the center, who looked like they might have let him go, keeping him. They got your favorite player in the NFL, Dalvin Tomlinson, which is always good. I think the Elijah Moore addition is definitely interesting and could be good, but again, didn't have a ton of resources to go with, and kind of got fair value for those resources. So C.
Uh, I am a B. I thought this was a good
Okay.
offseason.
Mm-hmm.
I think Zadarius Smith is better than Jadeveon Clowney in my mind. So I think getting Zadarius Smith is a
Mm-hmm.
huge ad. I think getting Dalvin Tomlinson's a nice ad. You know, I like John Johnson a lot as a football player, but I think Juan Thornhill can be better next season. So, I think that they got a pretty nice I think they got a pretty nice safety duo now. I think the secondary can get better because this defense did underperform last season, and they addressed a lot of their key issues, which was run defense, their secondary edge rusher, and safeties. I thought they got a lot better at those key spots with those four players. And you're looking at that. I think Elijah Moore is a pretty nice buy low candidate too. So I still have questions about the secondary receiver for this group, secondary pass catcher. I think Njoku's pretty good as a tight end, but outside of Amari Cooper, one of these guys between Peoples-Jones, Elijah Moore, and some of these guys has to step up. I think they drafted a couple guys as well. One of these guys has to step up and be that number two, but they're giving themselves a lot of chances to prove that they can be that guy.
Yeah, that's true. That is definitely I think you're right about the Zadarius Smith thing was a very good move. The question really with this Browns team though, we talk about ceiling. This is a team that feels like they have an incredibly high ceiling as well. The question really is just the quarterback play of Deshaun Watson was, again, I get it, had a long time off. We have not seen him play good football for a while now. It's been several years since we've seen him play good football. And if he can play like we saw him play his last year when he was playing in Houston, he could be, this could be, again, another team with their ceiling being Super Bowl contender.
Yeah. Even if let's just say Watson goes, he doesn't even have to be 2020 Watson where he was one of the 2 or 3 best players in the league. If you go back to 2019 where he's firmly in the top 10 quarterbacks, take this roster. How would you power rank this AFC North right now?
Power rank. So, I'm sorry. What was the stipulation again?
if Watson goes back to like 2019 level Watson, where he's firmly a top 10 quarterback, but not quite, top 5 level, how would you power rank this AFC North?
Well, I think my gut says I think Cincinnati still has to be number one because they've been competing for championships and seemingly should be just as good. I think that I think I would still go Baltimore 2. I think I would go Cleveland 3 and then Pittsburgh 4. But I think it's debatable between Baltimore and Cleveland. And I definitely think also as I have more time to think about it and really study the rosters when we get into our previews, I could change that.
Yeah. This is a good division. It's a really
Yeah.
tough division. But yeah,
Uh-huh.
I mean, I'm with you that I think Cleveland could be really good next year, but I mean, there's also the chance this bottoms out, right? Like
Hmm.
this team does feel like it has some variance to it.
There's a chance we're looking at this as one of the least attractive teams to take over at the end of this season. If Watson doesn't get better, they're going to fire their head coach. If they have a bad year, I mean, this could be a disaster.
Yeah, I agree.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, let's go from there to the Jacksonville Jaguars, which we can't really count the Calvin Ridley thing in this
Yeah.
offseason, right? Because it didn't happen this offseason. It happened last offseason, or it happened during the, not last offseason, but during the trade deadline. But, they lost some players. They lost Juwan Taylor, which better than paying him, given what he got, in my opinion. Sorry, Chiefs fans. Arden Key, I do think losing him hurts. And they need Trayvon Walker to step up. They just do. Like if Trayvon Walker doesn't step up, that's going to be an issue. They did keep Evan Ingram, but again, it's one of those where like I don't know. This feels like I'm going to go with I think I might go like a D plus. I got to get some D's and F's in here. It's not fair to have every single team be C or better. So I'll go D plus. Just because I would have rather them keep Arden Key.
Yeah, I went C. Like I said, I'm very friendly with this. I don't think I have a
Mm-hmm.
D or an F, honestly. But I went C just because they didn't do a lot, but I don't think they like got gutted or anything.
Mm-hmm.
But like they obviously didn't do a lot,
And they didn't have much resources.
Right. Like I think going like you said, I think going from Jawan Taylor to Anton Harrison may not be that bad.
Mm-hmm.
The hope is that this offensive line gets better. Um Pass rush, like even if the pass rush is going to be a big issue for them. I'm with you. I think that's going to be a big thing. They really got to figure out that pass rush situation. If they're able to do that, that will go a long way to, whether or not the Jaguars are a Super Bowl contender or not, or winning this division, because this is not the expectations bestowed on this team. But they got to get pass rush outside of Josh Allen, because everything else on this team feels pretty good. You'd think.
Yeah, and again, if Trayvon Walker develops, which like I don't know, I thought Trayvon Walker was a disastrous selection at first overall, and if that might be a surprise to some people to learn that I didn't love that selection. I think that but at the same time, kind of what I always said is there is a chance he hits. It's just going to take him years to do it, and so if you can get him to be good at some point during the season and live up to that hype, that's how this could potentially be a really good a great situation, but they have to have him step up now, which again, defense looked much better for Arden Key there last year than when Walker was there.
Yeah, without a doubt. So, I mean, there's a lot of expectations for him, but this is why you drafted number one overall. So it's going to be the big question because they kind of went all in with this, right? They knew that Key was going to be a free agent. And they went with Walker, and now they have to see the results. And they've spent a lot of money and they've invested a lot of resources as far as first round picks on edge rushing talent and pass rushing talent. They need one of these guys to step up, or else they're in trouble.
Yeah. Let's move on to the Titans now, going or staying in the AFC South here at this point. Titans, they got Arden Key, so obviously I'm a fan of that one. If I was mad at the Jaguars for losing him, also had Sean Murphy Bunting, so a couple guys there who are like, I always love these moves, right? It reminds me of like almost like Shaq Barrett went to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Like, hey, here's a good player who just has been stuck behind other good players in that position. Let's go out and get, let's take a chance. They don't always turn into superstars, but sometimes they do. So with Arden Key and Murphy Bunting, getting them and maybe putting them in bigger positions could be smart. Even Andre Dillard, that's interesting flyer. They added Peter Skoronski and Will Levis. I liked their draft. I like this offseason as a whole. I'm giving it a B.
Yeah, I have a B with this one too. I have some questions about Dillard at left tackle, honestly. Like, I know he was pretty highly regarded, but I have questions if guys aren't succeeding on the offensive line at Philadelphia, how they're going to succeed other places.
Right.
Just because, that's an offensive line factory, it seems like sometimes. So, yeah, I mean, I think they get better at pass rush this year. I think the defensive line should be nasty. I still have questions about pass catcher, honestly. And I think that's going to be the big thing that defines this Titans season, because I know this offense is different. You can't really judge it the same, but it clearly had an offensive downgrade without A.J. Brown. And they're kind of doubling down on, Burks being that guy to replace him eventually, which I thought he was good in his rookie season when he was healthy. He just wasn't healthy all the time. So they really need him to step up and be that guy. Otherwise, I'm not excited to watch Titans football if they don't have that pass catching option.
Yeah, I agree. This is not a team that we're all like, I can't wait to watch the Titans next year. That's just, in fairness, that's just kind of not how they have always been. They've been very good in the past 5 years or so, but they just haven't necessarily had the most exciting and flashy brand of football, which is fine. That's not what they're, win football games. That's all you have to do. But I'm not sure if this year they're going to win as many football games with it. I agree that, I don't think that they turned this roster into like a championship contender. I'm not sure what their ceiling is. In fact, I feel like they're one of the lower ceiling teams in the league, even though I think that there's a chance they should still be decent next year at the very least. But I don't know what they could have done this offseason to get them to a championship contender. And I think that they made some small moves to help put them in a better position than they were entering this offseason.
Yeah, they really had to address tackle, and they did. I just don't know if it's the right moves when it comes to especially Dillard. I think Skoronski's good. There are some people who are saying he's going to be better at guard. So if he's at guard, does that really solve your tackle issues? I mean, that's just going to be another question. Do you think Levis plays real games this season? Not like garbage time. Do you think he plays real games this year?
Yeah. Jersey guys in the chat said how long before Levis is starting. Here's what I think. I think if they're in playoff contention and Tannehill is Tannehill and is not injured, I think that Tannehill plays the whole year. I think that if the Titans, if this thing goes south, goes AFC south, if you will, I think that then I could see Will Levis getting some playing time.
Yeah, I probably see that. This is going to be one of the better front sevens in football. That too. Now, you could say how much value does a front seven add in modern NFL? Still, like you said, Arden Key is a good player. They get Landry back too. They get, Al-Shaair, I think, is a really nice linebacker pickup too. So, I mean, if you just look at this starting front seven, I think that's going to be a really nasty group.
Yeah, a lot of different players. Again, remember we had that whole debate all offseason. I feel like I was arguing with the fans, all offseason about Harold Landry and how good is he going to be, and then just gets injured and never gets to play. I'm excited to see him come back next year. We can really see who was right about the Harold Landry signing.
Yeah, but at the same time, if you look at this, this front group, he might be the third or fourth option.
Yeah,
I mean, he's still paid a lot, but at the same time, they got some dudes also to throw at people. So I don't know. This could be a really good group.
Yeah, and let's be honest, Jeffrey Simmons and 3 scrubs would still be a great defensive line.
Yes, and they don't have scrubs.
Right. Yeah. So that's that's what they have going for them. Let's move on. Let's go to the Colts, who obviously their big thing is the Anthony Richardson selection. They're taking a big swing, and we'll see how well it works out. And if it does work out, they could be looking really good. In classic, Colts fashion, they didn't sign a lot of guys in free agency. It's almost funny how the one free agent signing they had seemingly was Matt Gay. It's like, of course, you finally pay a guy and it's a kicker. But that's kind of how the Colts operate. They build through the draft, and they're hoping that they have their next quarterback. It's hard to fully evaluate what they did. And, I'm not saying I love every move they made, but at the same time, getting Josh Downs and Julius Brents in the draft as well, definitely fascinated by. And even Blake Freeland, I liked who they got in round 4. I'm going to give this a B just because, hey, do the right thing. Draft a young quarterback when you have the opportunity.
Yeah, I have it as a B as well. I thought that was not overthinking that and doing a good job. I've said this before a few times, I think this offensive line bounces back. You'd probably like another pass catcher here, but Isaiah McKenzie's the guy they went with, so it's whatever. I'm curious to see what this defense looks like next year, though. This was a defense that I thought underperformed the first year without Matt Eberflus. I think Shaquille Leonard's someone who could be a bounce back candidate. I know he dealt with some injuries. But the big thing is this team has always been pretty good in the secondary. And I'm pretty curious to see what these corners look like because they are small. And, not a lot of teams run a lot of small corners out there. But if you look at like their best corners are Isaiah Rodgers, who's 5'10", and Kenny Moore, who's 5'9", who's usually their slot guy. So how does this secondary look next year with those two guys as their top two corners? Because there's not a lot of length there, and I think that's something that could be taken advantage of.
Yeah, this is the rebuilding team, right? I mean, there's a complete rebuilding team. They have a lot of flyers, and we're going to see which guys look like they're going to be starters, and then for the following season, that's what you're doing this year.
I would probably agree with that. So I mean, this team could look completely different by next season, but there's still good players on this team. Like, it feels weird to say a real building team that has Shaquille Leonard, DeForest Buckner. I think Blackman's a nice safety. I think Kenny Moore's a nice corner. I thought Kwity Paye was, decent last year too. So, I mean, you look through that, there's good players on the offensive line. This doesn't really feel like a rebuilding team, but it probably is.
Yeah. I mean, again, then you look at like the, certain other, like the defensive back, wide receiver, and quarterback room and say, okay, yeah, we'll give it a year.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. So it's just bizarre.
Yeah. All right. Let's move on. Let's round out the AFC South with the Houston Texans. I think this is the rare team that made some A+ moves and some F- moves throughout this season, throughout this offseason. I struggle with where to put them. I think I'm going to still go with, I think I'm going to go B- here. And here's why. A couple moves I love. The CJ Stroud selection, huge fan of, and that alone is going to get you above C. You can't be C or below if you make that selection. But I really did not like the Will Anderson trade. The trade up to get Will Anderson. I thought that was a bad idea. I also like the Dalton Schultz signing. I thought that was good. Jimmy Ward, sure. But for the most part, the real thing about this is those two selections, CJ Stroud and not necessarily the Will Anderson selection. I have no issue with spending pick number 3 on that, but they gave up a ton of draft capital. Giving up their own first round pick that's really concerning. So again, if Will Anderson and CJ Stroud are stars, who cares? But there's a real chance that you're giving up a future top 5 pick for a guy in Will Anderson who maybe will be great, but we'll have to see.
Yeah, I'm with you on this. I said C+ just for the similar reasons. I do like the Stroud pick, but that being said, you have no insurance if Stroud's bad this season, right? Like, and not only that, you're punting on potentially a generational quarterback, for a player in Will Anderson. And, I never liked the idea of trading up that high for a non-quarterback. We talked about this a lot of the draft process. Trading up that high for a non-quarterback always feels like a mistake. It feels like, I think everyone the consensus on Will Anderson was kind of like, we all really like Will Anderson. A lot of the interview stuff was really great about Will Anderson. He's a culture setter, all that kind of stuff. But he's not a Myles Garrett level edge rusher. And if you're not trading up for a quarterback or a Myles Garrett level player, that feels like a mistake. And, I don't know how that's going to work. They got Dalton Schultz, like you said, which I thought was really good, but they also traded Brandon Cooks for basically nothing. You just look up and down the roster and it's like, there's a really good move coupled with a really bad move, really good move coupled with a really bad move. I think this Texans team's better than where it was last season, but it's still not great.
Yeah, I did like I thought that D'Amico Ryan's head coaching hire is still a good one in my opinion. But yeah, as a whole, the Houston Texans, a lot of good moves, a lot of really bad moves. So that being said, one of the best off seasons they've had in years.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Mhm.
would probably agree with that.
Uh-huh. Yeah. All right. Let's move on. Let's go to the Kansas City Chiefs, the reigning champions, who, hey, if they just sat around and did nothing, this is a good offseason. You won the Super Bowl last year, right? So, you have some house money to play with. I really didn't like this offseason. I didn't.
Right.
I straight up did not like this offseason. And it's crazy because last year I was, last year they made a very controversial decision when they traded Tyreek Hill. But other than that, I was pretty much a fan of every single thing they did last offseason. They had a lot of great, I had them as one of my favorite drafts. I believe last year, and it even exceeded my expectations. So who knows? Maybe this one will exceed my expectations as well. But I wasn't crazy about their draft. And the one move I just absolutely hated was the Jawan Taylor signing. I have not. He's an effective pass blocking right tackle who is not good at all in the run blocking game. So, hey, taking a flyer on him makes sense. Getting him on your roster for a team that doesn't run the ball, I totally get it. But paying him $20 million a year and now having him be your left tackle is preposterous when you could have signed Orlando Brown Jr. for less money. I did not understand that at all. So, Chiefs are still Super Bowl favorites, but I thought that this was a bad offseason. I'm giving it an F.
Yeah, I have this. This is probably the closest I'd have to a D. I have C minus just because I'm trying to be a little nicer.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I just think, look, the offensive tackle musical chairs they played this offseason was weird. I understand wanting to upgrade from Andrew Wiley, but they went from Orlando Brown Jr. and Andrew Wiley to Donovan Smith and Jawan Taylor.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I just don't understand how that necessarily works. And, I understand they got better at pass blocking, and that was obviously their goal. Is pass blocking is their number one priority. Donovan Smith is a much better pass blocker than he is run blocker. Jawan Taylor is obviously a much better pass blocker than he is run blocker. That's been talked about a lot. We all know that. But I don't know. It just seems like weird to, play those sort of musical chairs with this group. I don't think they necessarily got better, and they just spent more money on the group, it seems like overall. I like the Rashee Rice draft pick. I think that could be a really nice receiver group again, even beyond Kelsey. And then the other one I kind of want to highlight, I said it for the Browns. I thought Thornhill was really good for them. I was concerned about this team when they got rid of Tyrann Mathieu last year or the year before. And, Thornhill really stepped up and had a really nice year for them, I thought, at safety. Now Thornhill leaves, and they got Brian Cook stepping into that position. So how does that safety spot look? It's probably on the fringe of stuff. Like, listen, we cannot like this offseason. Kansas City is still probably the favorites to win the Super Bowl. They're probably still our favorites to win the AFC Championship. But there are a few things along the fringes here that you can nitpick a little bit. This is another team. We're testing a lot of this draft depth. We like George Karlaftis. Karlaftis has a bigger role now. Brian Cook's another guy. Like I said, he's going to have to step up into that safety spot, and they're going to ask him to be that kind of, step in and be that Thornhill level player. So there's a lot of expectations on some younger guys stepping into bigger roles for this team.
Yeah, listen, they have the best asset in sports right now. The Chiefs do with Patrick Mahomes. He's the best asset in sports. He gives them a chance to win a Super Bowl every year. I like Brett Veach a lot. Brett Veach he deserves a ton of credit, but for what he's done, and again, that draft last year was amazing. But at the same time, he isn't a god. He has made mistakes as well. I think, I remember getting a lot of tweets during that whole Jonathan Taylor thing of like, oh yeah, sure, let's trust some YouTuber over Brett Veach. No, don't trust him. He's a smarter person than me, but these are my opinions. And he is still the same guy who made that Frank Clark trade, right? There still are issues that he's made as well. He doesn't have a perfectly clean resume, although he does have now a very controversial decision when he traded away Tyreek Hill that worked out. And so because of that, if this was not the Chiefs, if this was some other organization, I'd be like, what the hell are they doing? I'm willing to say, okay, I get what you're doing. I just don't like it.
Yeah. I mean, and, like a lot of people have tried to counter and say, Smith and Taylor make more sense for the Chiefs than they do other teams because the Chiefs almost pass the ball all the time, right? So it makes a little more sense. It's still a lot of money for guys I just don't think are very good players.
Yeah.
Regardless if you think it fits the system more. So it seems like a bold call, but we'll see. This team's still going to be pretty good, I think. And, we're probably going to look dumber saying this was a bad offseason because they're going to win 14 games, 15 games and be really good again because it's Kansas City Chiefs. But, it's nitpicking season, and there are a lot of picks to nit here. So
Hmm.
I don't know. Overall, I still think they're going to be really good, but I do have some questions about that. I had a question for you about this team, and I'm drawing a blank on it now. So
Okay.
let's just move on before this gets awkward.
Well, here, I'll go. I have one last point about the Chiefs, and then we'll see if it comes back to you. If not, we'll just go. The Donovan Smith thing, I was just going to, as someone who's watched a lot of his career, Donovan Smith was terrible. He got paid a bunch of money, and then Tom Brady came to town, and all of a sudden he looked like a great tackle. But a big part of what his thing is like he's a great tackle when every snap he has to block for 2.5 seconds. Like if the ball's going out every single time quickly, he's not going to give up those immediate pressures, but he will give up pressures if you start to have those 3-second snaps. He's not a guy who will just hold guys off for for forever. Mahomes loves to hold on to the ball for a while. Great at avoiding sacks, but I think he's going to have to avoid a lot this season, potentially, if Smith is a starter. But again, paying him under $3 million for 1 year, a total fine flyer. I don't really have an issue with that, but I do think that, again, I'm just confused by the Jonathan Taylor one.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I wouldn't be surprised also if who's the tackle they drafted, Wanya Morris. I wouldn't be surprised if he also gets some playing time this year. So we'll see how it all works out. Andy Reid obviously coaches offensive line exceptionally well. I guess the one thing I remember my question. Are you concerned at all going from Eric Bieniemy to Matt Nagy, or do you not care?
I care a little. I do care. I think, it seems like Bieniemy's done a good job since being there. And I think that, Matt Nagy has been a very good coordinator over his career. So I don't think it'll be a bad thing necessarily, but I would consider it. It's nothing that would affect my letter grade, but it is something that I would say I think it matters.
Yeah, I think that's a storyline to watch. I'm with you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very, very fair. Let's move on to the Chargers. Chargers are a team where, I like what the Chargers did in some areas. I think that I like what they did getting, Quentin Johnson. I really like that selection. Could Eric Kendricks come back and be the elite player we've seen him be at times? Potentially. Didn't have a lot to do. I don't really know what to talk about too much with the Chargers because they just didn't have a lot of options here. So I'm just going to give it a C.
I said B. I thought there were some good moves here. Like you said, I like Johnson. I think that's really going to help right away. They brought back most of their key guys, like the whole Austin Eckler thing. I thought they got pretty good value for bringing him back too. The big thing with this team is like I wouldn't be shocked at all if Eric Kendricks has a bounce back season, right? Like just because he's coming back to a better situation than I think he left in Minnesota, which was just a putrid defense. But I don't know. It feels like a lot of this Chargers offseason is guys who they got have to be better, right? Like, JC Jackson has to be significantly better for this to work out because they invested him as a number one corner and he didn't play the exact opposite of number one corner last year. I think their interior defensive line has to play a little bit better. If Kendricks is good, that's going to help the linebacker core, which should help their front seven a little bit defend the run. But yeah, I mean, those things have to be better. But overall, I think getting a guy like Johnson really helps. And I think that was probably outside of fixing some of these defensive guys getting better was their number one need was another receiver. So I give it a B. And they changed offensive coordinators, which had to be done.
Yeah, right. And I like Kellen Moore. I think he's good. I like that decision. JC Jackson, you brought that up. Only played in 244 snaps. But so maybe you could say, is it really fair to judge him? His PFF grade last year, 28.7. I mean, this is if it was doubled, we're still talking below average.
Yeah. It's still terrible, actually, if it's below average.
Yeah.
Look, I mean, I don't know. It feels like a situation. Like I'm willing to give him the benefit of the doubt, just because he basically dealt with injuries before the season, and I don't think he was healthy all year. But I don't know. We've seen this with guys leaving Belichick before, especially in the secondary. Like I don't want to say they got hustled again, but you could fault Belichick for a lot of things over the last couple of years, but he understands secondary better than anybody else, and this could just be another one of those situations.
Yeah, I was thinking about the Khalil Mack thing as well. If you're paying him $20 million a year, and it worked out last year, I thought he played well for them, but still, it's like, okay, now it's 32 now. You're paying him $20 million a year to be a difference, really to be a star player. And I think he's still been a very good player, but has he been that superstar level that he's been in years past? I don't think so. I don't know how well I trust this run defense to continue playing well. Could there, maybe that could have been a move. Maybe it could have been something where you get rid of Khalil Mack and add more talent. I don't know. There were moves to be made. They didn't make them. I think they should still be good next year. So there were things they could have done that they chose not to, and we'll see how it goes.
Who are you buying into more next season? Chargers or Jaguars?
I think that's a very fast. This might be a hot take. I think I'm still going Chargers. I know that the Jaguars beat them in the playoffs and had that huge comeback, but I do think that with the addition of Quentin Johnson and hopefully with a healthy Mike Williams and Keenan Allen and with a better offensive coordinator, and I just, as of right now, I know Justin Herbert's great. I don't know that Trevor Lawrence is great. I think he'll be great. I'm expecting him to be great, but I don't know if he's great. He's shown flashes of being great, but has not consistently been great. Justin Herbert has. So give me the quarterback. But you could, I know most people will probably say Jacksonville.
Yeah. I think I would lean Jacksonville. I know we didn't count it for this offseason because they did it last year, but Calvin Ridley feels like a more significant upgrade than Quentin Johnson.
I agree. I agree, but it just, I think that what will we see Trevor Lawrence take that next level and be as good as Justin Herbert next year?
Yeah. It'll be interesting. I don't know. I'm buying some, I wouldn't bet a lot on it because he's going to be, he shouldn't have near the best odds, but I'm buying some low Trevor Lawrence MVP odds. I'd do it.
I have to say, I feel like every single time in the history of the NFL, if it's happened 100 times where there's been the dark horse MVP candidate that has never played like even a very good quarterback yet, they've always had a bad year. Baker Mayfield, Jameis Winston, it just happens. This guy, look out for this guy, always ends in disaster. So it's completely irrational because I don't think that'll happen with Lawrence. But I will never buy some MVP odds on the dark horse MVP guy. Won't do it.
Although this is pretty funny. So FanDuel current odds for MVP. Trevor Lawrence plus 1,600, Aaron Rodgers plus 1,600, Lamar Jackson plus 1,500, Tua plus 1,600, Dak Prescott plus 1,600. Anyone betting on Tua to win MVP over Lamar Jackson at just about the same odds, categorically insane. Or Dak Prescott. If you're betting Dak Prescott plus 1,600 when Lamar's plus 1,500, you need therapy.
I think the Cowboys always have that though. Remember the Thanksgiving game when the Cowboys were playing they were playing the Panthers, and the Panthers were 11-0. The Cowboys were 4-7, and the Cowboys were favored in that game.
Yeah, that's just insane. I don't know. That's crazy to me. I would never bet that.
Yeah.
Justin Fields is plus 2,000. That's insane.
Yeah. Always interesting to see. But hey, one of them is going to be right. If you take those flyers every now and then, you're going to get me right, and then you have bragging rights for life.
Listen, Justin Fields at plus 2,000 MVP odds. That means you could waste $20 betting Justin Fields to win MVP.
Wow, you think no chance Justin Fields win? I mean, it seems unlikely.
His team. I mean, even if he takes a massive leap, his team has to win like 12 games. That's not happening. Probably not. Maybe go for Mahomes or maybe Burrow or Allen there. Yeah, that's probably the right bet.
Mm-hmm. Oh, Trey Lance for only plus 5,000.
Kenny Pickett plus 4,000. Anyone?
Okay, there you go. You also have Mac Jones plus 6,000. There's some sleepers here. Sam Darnold plus 10,000.
I like Jordan Love plus 3,500.
Okay.
Jordan Love versus Aaron Rodgers Super Bowl. That's what I'm hoping for.
Yeah, how does Aaron Rodgers and Trevor Lawrence have this? Lawrence is he has the same odds as Rodgers, Lamar, and Tua. I think that's a bit too high.
Yeah, I take it back now. I was hoping Lawrence would have a little bit juicier odds.
Mm-hmm. See, that's the issue because they never do. They never actually have the odds because everyone says, "Oh, look out for Lawrence next year." He's like the 5th or 6th best MVP candidate. Yeah, exactly. It's crazy. I can't do that. Yeah. No. It happens every year, and they're always bad. It's never once worked.
I'm buying on him being good though. I think he
And
could be
I
really good.
totally am. I totally agree. I'm just saying that's typically how it goes. The one year it almost worked was Kyler Murray, and that completely killed the Cardinals.
Yeah. They paid him a lot of
Yeah.
money for that.
Yeah. We'll see. Okay, got off the rails here, which we do. Hey, it's I think I don't know. Every hour or so, we eventually get off the rails.
It's what we do. So let's keep it rolling.
Yeah.
Raiders.
Raiders. Next up, I'm giving it a D. I just don't get it.
Yeah.
I don't think this is gonna work. I get it. I just don't think this is gonna work. The getting Jimmy Garoppolo, getting rid of Derek Carr. I like adding Jacoby Myers. Don't like them getting rid of Darren Waller. Did not like the Tyree Wilson selection. I'm not a fan of his personally. So I don't know. It feels like they're saying, you know what? Let's just win like 7 games next year. Which, okay, go ahead, but that's just not how I would run a team.
Yeah, I got D2. It feels like a team that's trying to win games but also cut costs. Which when has that ever worked?
Right.
Like they cut Carr to go to Jimmy Garoppolo. They get rid of Darren Waller, who was hurt last year, to go to Austin Hooper and Michael Mayer. They still suck on the offensive line, so I don't really know how that's going to fix anything. They didn't really get better anywhere on defense, so I don't know. I'm not really excited to watch this team next year. This feels like bottom feeders in the AFC West.
What do you mean you're not? The Raiders are always interesting to watch. When they win 3 games, they're the most interesting 3. They're a dumpster fire, but an entertaining one.
I mean, yeah, and we got a lot of Raiders fans here, so obviously we're gonna talk about them a lot, and we're gonna watch them a lot because they're interested. But that being said, I don't know, like this feels like a team that's destined for like 4 wins because they're trying to win 8 games. When have we ever seen a team cut costs and still try and win games and it's worked?
Yeah, no, it doesn't. It's not the correct. It's not a smart decision. I think, and it's disappointing because they were at least. I mean, again, we have first off a lot of Fs in the chat about this. We also have an F. See me after class by ATU Urban. Yeah, Josh is a disaster as a head coach. I mean, it really is crazy where it's like, okay, you had Rick Bisaccia, who clearly they should have kept as head coach. I mean, that was in hindsight a massive mistake. They completely do this whole new thing where they say we're going to get rid of Derek Carr, we're going to add Jimmy Garoppolo. When McDaniels got there, they were, I don't know, a play away. They nearly scored a touchdown when they were down 7. I think they would have gone for 2. So they're probably 2 successful plays away from knocking off the eventual AFC champion that year in the postseason. To then be in this spot just a couple years later. I'm not saying it's all McDaniels' fault because it's definitely not, but like what a disaster this past calendar year has been.
Yeah. I mean, this is a team with legitimately maybe 4 blue chippers on the roster.
Mm-hmm.
Like you look at Adams is obviously, a stud.
Mm-hmm.
I would say does Colton Miller qualify?
Maybe not blue. He's a very good player though. Definitely. Yeah. He's a star player.
Josh Jacobs, obviously.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then Max Crosby. Like outside of that, like I don't know. Who's the next best player beyond that? Jacoby Myers? Hunter Renfrow?
Yeah, probably Myers or Renfrow would be the I don't know. Austin Hooper's all right. Is it Garoppolo?
No, it's not Garoppolo.
I mean, well, look at who else. I mean, Nate Hobbs. He's best. That's next best. Although he didn't have a great year last year.
That's fair. But I don't know. It's brutal. Like I think this team's gonna be awful, low key. I'm actually pretty fascinated to watch Garoppolo.
Daniel Carlson, an extra blue chipper. Daniel Carlson,
thank you. Okay, you got the kicker. That's a good thing. I'm actually fascinated to watch Garoppolo though next season. I don't know. I think he's kind of massively overrated, and now he's not in Kyle Shanahan's system. So, how does this look? I'm interested to see how that works out because it just feels like that's going to be a huge drop off compared to what he was in before. So it'll be interesting to see what that looks like.
Yeah, completely agree. One last team here in the AFC, the Broncos, Denver Broncos, who, they added Sean Payton and they're doing things the Sean Payton way. They went out and got Mike McGlinchey and Ben Powers, offensive line. That's what they do. They go out and they get offensive linemen. Did not, the Zach Allen signing paid him some money. Definitely something there. I don't know. Got Sean Payton. I think they're doing their best to salvage this. I'm giving this a B because this could be a disaster, but they have a game plan. And if it's gonna go bad, you're screwed anyways. Like there's no scenario where the Broncos end up being in an okay spot next year. They're either in a great spot or a terrible one. I think they have a chance of being in a great one after what they did this offseason.
I actually think it's an A.
Okay.
I think the thing, like, I can't fault this team for previous off seasons. Like, obviously, the problem is that a lot of the stink of last year is still hanging over this team, and I think that's the big problem. But I think you need a new head coach. You needed a head coach with an experience based on what happened last season, where you get a coach with no head coaching experience, and he's a complete disaster. They went out and got the best head coach on the market. You needed offensive line help in the worst way. They added, I think, two of the better offensive line options on the market, I think, this offseason, too, especially McGlinchey. I thought he was one of the best ones on the market as far as right tackles go. So, I think those are all just pretty good moves. And I think, Zach Allen, I think, is an overpay. I think Zach Allen's a good football player, though. I think a lot of their stuff over the last year or so has been bad, but I thought the stuff they did this offseason was pretty good. And, they could be a bounce back team next year. But I mean, it all comes down to, is Russell Wilson a playable quarterback? Because if he can have a bounce back year, then obviously, this team's going to be pretty good. But yeah, I mean, I can't fault the team for some of the stuff. If we're grading just this offseason, I can't grade previous stuff. When I thought, the moves they made this year were at least pretty good to average. If Zach Allen.
Yeah, no, I think that's totally fair. Because I agree, they were in a very tough spot and have made the most of it. Would have liked them to do more with the receiving game as well. They did add Marvin Mims along with a couple of former Saints and Lil Jordan Humphrey and Marquez Callaway. But would have maybe like to see them, instead of using that money to help out your defensive line, which is already a good defense, maybe use some of that money to help out your receiving core a little bit more. That's my other nitpick. I know Tim Patrick's coming back. I know hopefully you'll be healthy, with Cortland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy, and Tim Patrick. But we keep saying this. Oh, these three guys, we've been saying this for 5 years now. Oh, look at these three guys. At a certain point, they have to show up. And if they're not, you have to put more resources in there.
And they've been talking about trading one of these guys all offseason. So you don't know exactly what that's going to look like before the season starts, too. So, yeah, I mean, that's probably the one thing where you could say, you could have gone a receiver, but it's one of those things, too, where they didn't have a first-round pick to add a receiver there. So how good of a receiver could they have added this offseason? This could be another team where, it's a lot of teams in this, DeAndre Hopkins changes a lot, but if they get a guy like Hopkins, does that change the spectrum a little bit where they get that level of a player?
Yeah. Well, I mean, listen, I think we could say that for every team, right? If they get DeAndre Hopkins, it's a lot better of an offseason.
Yeah. I don't think this team's in the DeAndre Hopkins sweepstakes, but I still think it was pretty good overall. I think they got better this offseason based on where they were.
Yeah, I think I agree. All right, that is the AFC. So next week, again, sorry for surprising everyone with what times we do the show. Next week we will be doing the NFC. So that should be interesting, definitely. And if Hopkins is signed, we'll talk about that next week as well. Same time, 5:00 Eastern on Wednesday. Kyle, let them know where they can find us on Twitter before we head out.
Yeah, make sure to follow us on Twitter at Jackson Kruger. Make sure to follow me at by Kyle Grana, and make sure to follow the account page at On the Sideline JK. That is at On the Sideline JK.
Yes, of course, if you like audio only podcast, anywhere you get the audio only podcast, it should be available. Just search On the Sideline podcast. Kyle, we now know which teams are playing in the NBA Finals and in the Stanley Cup Final. Two South Florida teams. No Boston teams. Let's just curious. I'm assuming you have Nuggets beating the Heat, right?
Yeah, I got the Nuggets. This Miami Heat season's bizarre. It makes absolutely no sense, but they're the second 8 seed ever to make the NBA Finals. They could become the first 8 seed to win the NBA Finals. That's all pretty surprising. I just think the bizarre thing for the Heat season is that I really didn't think Pat Riley did that good of a job with this team the last couple of seasons. Pat Riley is still a legend of the game. He's, one of the best coaches ever, one of the best executives ever. He has done this for a very long time and been very successful. But like, this team wasn't able to add a lot of talent because they were hitched to these Duncan Robinson and Kyle Lowry contracts, which were really bad contracts. But then Jimmy Butler goes up a level in the playoffs. Kyle Lowry starts to play well in the playoffs. Duncan Robinson becomes playable in the playoffs because Tyler Hero's hurt. And all of these undrafted guys all of a sudden just start playing well. And this team, which looked like it was just soaking in mediocrity all season, is in the NBA Finals. It's just one of the most bizarre stories ever. And the way they were able to turn this thing around was pretty remarkable, I think, in this playoffs. And, they're not really reinventing the wheel of basketball or anything. It's just Jimmy Butler's been playing at an insane level, and they shot the ball from 3 at an insane level, which could give Denver's defense some problems, but it just feels like this Denver team's been the best team all year, and we're just now seeing it.
Yeah, I like this. Jimmy Butler is like the Joe Flacco of the NBA. Yeah, I could see that.
That feels disrespectful to Jimmy Butler because he was second team
early Joe Flacco, young, in his 20s Joe Flacco.
Butler was still second team All NBA this season. Like, he's a guy, but he does go up a level. He does go up a level when in the playoffs.
Is he an elite dragon in the playoffs? Like Joe Flacco?
Yeah, exactly. He's even better. So,
okay.
Fair enough. I mean, it's just it should be a fun final. I think it's going to be really entertaining. And I mean, if you haven't watched this Denver Nuggets team, I mean, I would just recommend watching them. They play such an awesome brand of basketball. I mean, it really is. There's a ton of ball movement. There's a ton of spacing. They love to play in transition too. I mean, there's just so much to love. And I mean, people are talking about him now for sure, but for a guy who was a 2-time MVP, Nikola Jokic didn't get a lot of love for a lot of years. And it seems like people are talking about him now more than ever. And he's a fun player to watch. I mean, he really is. He's the most unassuming basketball star of all time. He looks like he could be hosting a podcast if he wasn't 7 foot. And he's just this basketball savant. He's a genius out there.
Yeah, no, it's a lot of fun. All of it. So what's your final prediction?
I said Nuggets in 5.
Okay, yeah, seems right. I don't know. I think you got it in the finals. You got to give a team at least an extra game. Got to give them 6.
Yeah, I said Nuggets in 5 in the Lakers series. They won in 4. So
okay, yeah, gotcha.
This is the extra game for me.
Yeah, is it possible the Heat are just like really good at like player development? I feel like that's something that we never talk about in sports.
Oh, they're fantastic at it. Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, if you look at these guys like Gabe Vincent, undrafted guy, Max Strus. Max Strus was on the Celtics, and they cut him. Gotcha. And he's just come and tortured this team the last couple of years in the playoffs. He's been really good. Duncan Robinson was another undrafted guy. They overpaid him, but he was an undrafted guy who turned into a stud for them as well. And then who's the other guy they got? Caleb Martin. Caleb Martin was debatably the best player of the Eastern Conference Finals. They got him for nothing. Charlotte cut him. One of the worst teams in the league cut him. And he's doing some big things for Miami this playoffs.
Yeah, I do have to say though, I didn't watch every game, but I watched a decent chunk of it. I think Jimmy Butler deserved the award. I know a lot of people are saying Caleb Martin could have got it. I think that's maybe more of a fun story than it is the actual who should have gotten it.
I mean, the Heat tick as Butler goes, right? Like I thought Butler had some bad games in the series, and that's probably the debate for Martin because he was pretty consistently good in that series. But Jimmy is still the offensive initiator for that team.
Yeah, that's how I saw it. Also, imagine being a Heat and Panthers fan, a Florida Panthers fan. Like you must be going crazy right now with the stress that's about to happen. Panthers, Golden Knights are in the Stanley Cup final. Kyle, I did say we talked about this a little bit. Heading into the playoffs, I said the 2 teams that aren't getting enough credit: Golden Knights and Panthers.
Yeah. I mean, the Panthers have just been an absolute bender since going down 3-1, right? Like they won 3 straight against Boston. They beat Toronto in 5 and Carolina in 5, right? So they
swept Carolina.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that's right. So they are 11-1 since going down 3-1 to the Bruins in the playoffs.
Yeah.
Like, that's unbelievable.
Crazy. And the one loss was in overtime.
Yeah. So I mean, that's an incredible run. Like, I think Vegas is the better team top to bottom, but at the same time, like, how do you pick against Florida when they're on this kind of heater? Like, they're
Right.
probably going
Yeah.
to win this thing.
Yeah. I mean, Florida doesn't seem like they're a better team, but that doesn't stop them before. Well, it is like, I do feel like in hockey, it's almost like the opposite of basketball. Basketball, all we talk about is stars. And hockey, like, we don't really talk about stars. We talk about all like depth and stuff like that. Like having T'Chuk, who just can't stop scoring game winners in the big moments, and then having Bobrovsky, who is looking like he's, back in Columbus, like probably the two best players in this series, I would think, are right now are those two guys for Florida. I do think Vegas has a lot more depth. I think Vegas is still going to win the series, but I wouldn't be shocked at all if Florida steals it.
Yeah. I think I'm taking Florida. I really am. I think they've just been on a heater. I mean, Bobrovsky's been unbelievable. So I just think it's one of those things where it just feels like the team of destiny right now is Florida. I mean, they've just been unbelievable this stretch of the last month. And yeah, I mean, T'Chuk's been unbelievable too. They have all these guys, and it's not like it's a team that doesn't have star talent either. This team won the President's Trophy last year. They went through this whole kind of cultural shift with their team and their style of play this season, and I think it really affected them for a long stretch of the year. And it seems like they're playing their best hockey at the right time of the year.
Yeah. Well, it's crazy to think about. If Pittsburgh just won their last two games of the season against bottom feeders, Chicago and Columbus, that's all they had to beat. They won those two games. The Panthers wouldn't even be in the playoffs. It's kind of crazy how sports work that way.
Yeah. It feels like there's a lot of sliding doors moments to this Panthers season, right? Like
that Brad Marchand breakaway.
Yeah, I mean, Brad Marchand's on a breakaway in the final seconds of Game 5 with the chance for the Bruins to go through, and Bobrovsky makes a save, and Florida comes back and wins this. I mean, they were that close to elimination in the regular season and the playoffs, and they're still at this point where they're now in the finals. So
yeah,
I mean,
no. It's crazy what they're doing. Jersey guys asked, does Tampa and Florida have a rivalry? Kind of, but not really. I think the Panthers are fun to watch. I mean, why would I root? I feel like the Lightning sweeping the Panthers almost like took all this win out of sales of the rivalry, because now the Panthers just hated the Panthers.
Yeah, I would say that it's gotten better over the last couple of years, right? Like, because for a long time the Panthers weren't good,
right?
And then for a long time also the Panthers didn't have the fan base. But now they have a growing fan base and they're competitive to where it's a little more interesting.
Yeah. And the fan base, I think, gets too much criticism too, because they're one of those. I went to a game there, and the stadium location is just not good. Like, it's just hard to get to the games. I think that hurts them. They have good fans there. Just it's hard for them to get there. But very exciting. Two teams that haven't won a Stanley Cup, to two Southern teams. I love that. And again, no Canadian teams. That's always fun.
No Canadian teams is always fun for us. I agree with you with the stadium thing. No, nothing's fun about a place called Sunrise, Florida. Is that not the definition of an old person sound?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm retired in Sunrise. My neighbors are, Sully and Darlene. They're like 76. That's the most depressing town name ever. That's where people go to die. And there's a hockey team there. It's so bizarre.
Yeah, no, exactly. Should be exciting. Hey, fourth year in a row, a Florida-based team in the Stanley Cup final.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
Bruins
great stuff.
Yeah.
Hey, maybe I'll go again. I was there when the Stanley Cup was won last year. Maybe I'll go again.
Are you gonna go?
I was out there. I have a friend who's a big Panthers. Tickets are probably a lot cheaper than they were going to Tampa.
I would imagine so, but it also is their first time, so maybe it's more expensive because of that.
As someone who's seen my team, fortunately, go now 4 times in my lifetime, or I guess 3 of those were when there were tickets because one was the COVID year. It just tends to go. It tends to not get more cheap. Is how it works.
Yeah. That being said, people buying tickets to the Stanley Cup final means they have to drive to Sunrise, so that's probably not going to happen.
Right? Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. All right, Kyle. That's a show. Any final thoughts?
No. no. Looking forward to that. Like I said, Cup final, NBA finals should be good stuff. A lot going on right now. A lot of sports happening. I'll be in New York here in 10 days for Red Sox Yankees, so that should be fun too. So
Oh,
good stuff
nice.
happening. So
Yeah,
looking forward to it.
good stuff. And we'll be back a week from today. Everyone be on the lookout for that. Again, 5 o'clock Eastern. In the meantime, have a good one.
Peace.